What happens when a Sigma finally stops caring? Not caring in the way most people think, not becoming angry, not seeking revenge, not making a dramatic exit. A true Sigma rarely reacts that way. Instead, something much more interesting happens. At first, you may not even notice it. The Sigma still shows up. They still speak when necessary. They still handle their responsibilities. On the surface, everything seems normal. But beneath that calm exterior, a major shift has already taken place. You see, Sig individuals are known for being patient. They give people chances. They tolerate mistakes. They often observe quietly before making decisions. Unlike impulsive people who react emotionally to every disappointment, a Sigma usually spends a long time evaluating situations before reaching a conclusion. That's why many people make a costly mistake. They assume that because a Sigma is silent, everything is fine. What they don't realize is that silence doesn't always mean acceptance. Sometimes it means the Sigma is paying attention. Sometimes it means they are reconsidering how much energy, effort, and attention they are willing to invest. And once that process begins, things rarely go back to the way they were. One of the most misunderstood things about Sigma personalities is that they don't always announce when they've had enough. They don't hold meetings. They don't give endless warnings. They don't beg people to change. Instead, they quietly adjust their priorities. The attention disappears. The effort decreases. The emotional investment fades. And by the time most people notice the change, the decision has often already been made. This is why the moment a Sigma stops caring can be so difficult to recognize. There are no dramatic speeches, no emotional breakdowns, no desperate attempts to be understood, just subtle signs that something has changed. The scary part? Many people only recognize these signs after it's too late. They suddenly realize the Sigma who once cared deeply is no longer emotionally invested. The person who once gave their time, energy, and loyalty has quietly stepped back. In today's video, we're going to explore asterisk 10 signs a Sigma has stopped caring. These signs are subtle, powerful, and often misunderstood. If you've ever wondered how a Sigma reacts when they emotionally detach from a person, situation, or relationship, these signs will reveal everything you need to know. Make sure you stay until the end, because the final sign is often the most powerful of all, and it's usually the point where there is no turning back. Asterisk 1. They stop explaining themselves. One of the first signs that a Sigma has stopped caring is that they stop explaining themselves. In the past, they may have taken the time to clarify their intentions, defend their actions, or help people understand where they were coming from. They valued the relationship enough to communicate openly and prevent misunderstandings. But something changes when a Sigma emotionally detaches. They begin to realize that not everyone genuinely wants to understand them. Some people only listen to argue, others twist explanations to fit their own narrative, and some have already made up their minds regardless of what is said. At that point, the Sigma stops wasting energy. Instead of explaining every decision, they simply make it. Instead of defending themselves against every accusation, they remain silent. Instead of trying to correct every misunderstanding, they let people believe whatever they want. To outsiders, this silence can seem cold or distant. Some assume the Sigma has become arrogant. Others may think they no longer care about the relationship. In reality, the silence often reflects a deeper realization. Not every battle deserves attention. A Sigma understands that explanations only matter when the other person is willing to listen with an open mind. When that willingness disappears, so does the need to keep talking. What makes this sign powerful is that it usually happens after repeated disappointment. The Sigma didn't stop explaining overnight. They likely spent a long time trying to communicate before eventually deciding that their energy could be better spent elsewhere. Once they reach this stage, conversations become shorter. Defensiveness disappears. The desire to justify every action fades away. And that's when many people begin to notice something is different. The Sigma who once cared enough to explain everything no longer feels the need to explain anything at all. Asterisk 2. They become emotionally distant. Another major sign that a Sigma has stopped caring is emotional distance. This change is often subtle at first, which is why many people fail to recognize it until much later. A Sigma who cares deeply is often more invested than people realize. They may not express emotions dramatically, but they pay attention. They listen carefully, they remember details, they make time for the people and situations that matter to them. When they stop caring, that emotional investment begins to disappear. Conversations that once felt meaningful become routine. Situations that once triggered strong emotions no longer create much reaction. The sigma becomes calmer, quieter, and less emotionally involved. Many people mistake this for maturity or patience. Sometimes it is. But other times, it is a sign of emotional detachment. The reason is simple. People naturally invest energy into what they value. When value decreases, so does emotional involvement. A sigma rarely reaches this point suddenly. Usually, it happens after repeated disappointments, broken trust, or a realization that their effort is no longer appreciated. Instead of becoming angry, they begin pulling back emotionally. They stop sharing as much. They stop opening up. They stop caring about outcomes that once mattered. What makes this sign difficult to notice is that there is often no conflict attached to it. The Sigma isn't creating drama. They aren't making announcements. They're simply becoming less emotionally available. By the time others notice the change, the emotional distance may already be significant. And once a Sigma reaches this level of detachment, rebuilding that connection can be far more difficult than most people realize. Asterisk 3. They stop arguing. Most people assume that arguing means someone cares too much. In reality, the opposite is often true. When a Sigma stops arguing, it can be one of the strongest signs that they have stopped caring. Think about it. Why do people argue? Usually because they want to be understood. They want to solve a problem. They want to improve a situation. Arguments often come from investment. A Sigma who still cares may challenge ideas, address issues, and engage in difficult conversations because they believe the relationship or situation is worth the effort. But when that investment disappears, so does the desire to argue. Instead of correcting people, they remain silent. Instead of defending their position, they let others keep their opinions. Instead of fighting to save a connection, they step back and observe. This change often confuses people. Someone who once spoke up now says very little. Someone who once tried to resolve misunderstandings no longer seems interested in fixing them. The reason is not weakness. It is not surrender. It is indifference. The Sigma has reached a point where winning the argument no longer feels important. Being understood no longer feels necessary. They realize that some people will never change their perspective, regardless of how much evidence or explanation is provided. Rather than wasting energy on endless debates, they choose peace. Ironically, this silence often has a stronger impact than any argument ever could. People expect resistance. They expect a reaction. What they don't expect is complete indifference. And that's what makes this sign so powerful. When a Sigma stops arguing, it often means they've already emotionally moved on from the outcome. Asterisk 4. They reduce communication. One of the clearest signs that a Sigma has stopped caring is a noticeable change in communication. A Sigma is not usually the most talkative person in the room, but when they value someone, they make an effort. They reply, they check in, they listen, and they stay connected in their own way. When that effort starts disappearing, it often means something deeper has changed. At first, the difference may seem small. Replies become shorter, conversations become less frequent. The Sigma stops being the one who starts discussions. Instead of reaching out regularly, they become increasingly silent. Many people assume they're simply busy. Sometimes that's true. But when the pattern continues, it often reveals emotional withdrawal rather than a lack of time. The important thing to understand is that communication requires energy. People naturally invest that energy where they see value. When a Sigma feels that their effort is no longer appreciated, respected, or reciprocated, they begin redirecting that energy elsewhere. What's interesting is that they rarely announce this decision. They don't send long messages explaining why they're pulling away. They simply stop making communication a priority. Over time, the relationship begins to change. Conversations feel different. The connection feels weaker. The person who once seemed present now feels distant. For many people, this is the moment they start realizing something is wrong. But by then, the Sigma may have already spent weeks or months emotionally checking out. Communication isn't just about words, it's about effort. And when a Sigma reduces that effort, it's often a sign that they no longer feel the same level of investment they once did. Asterisk 5. They stop seeking closure. Most people want answers. When relationships end, friendships change, or disappointments occur, they search for explanations. They want closure because they believe understanding will help them move forward. A Sigma is no different at first. When they care, they often try to understand what happened. They ask questions. They look for clarity. They attempt to make sense of situations that seem confusing or painful. But when a Sigma truly stops caring, something changes. they stop chasing closure. Instead of demanding explanations, they accept uncertainty. Instead of waiting for apologies, they move on without them. Instead of needing every question answered, they focus on what comes next. This mindset surprises many people because closure is often viewed as necessary for healing. A Sigma eventually realizes that closure doesn't always come from other people. Sometimes it comes from accepting reality as it is. Not everyone will explain themselves. Not everyone will admit their mistakes. Not every situation will end neatly. Rather than spending months searching for answers that may never arrive, a Sigma chooses to let go. This doesn't happen because they suddenly stop feeling emotions. It happens because they stop believing that someone else holds the key to their peace of mind. That realization is powerful. When a Sigma no longer seeks closure, it means they have stopped waiting for someone else to provide the resolution they need. They create that resolution themselves by moving forward. And once they reach that point, they become incredibly difficult to pull back into old situations. Asterisk 6. They focus more on themselves. When a Sigma stops caring about a person, situation, or relationship, the energy doesn't simply disappear, it gets redirected. One of the most obvious places it goes is towards self improvement. Instead of investing emotional energy into people who no longer deserve it, the Sigma begins investing in themselves. They focus on goals, skills, health, personal growth, and long term ambitions. This change is often dramatic. The time once spent worrying becomes productive. The energy once spent overthinking becomes focused. The attention once given to someone else becomes an investment in personal development. Many people misunderstand this shift. They assume the Sigma is being selfish or distant. In reality, the Sigma is simply recognizing where their effort will produce the greatest return. There comes a point where repeatedly investing in the wrong people becomes exhausting. Rather than continuing that cycle, the Sigma chooses to build a better life. They may start learning new skills. They may focus more intensely on work or business. They may improve their physical health, develop new habits, or pursue goals they previously neglected. What's important is that their focus changes from external validation to internal growth. This is often one of the strongest signs of emotional detachment because it demonstrates a shift in priorities. The Sigma is no longer waiting for someone else to change. They are no longer trying to fix every problem around them. Instead, they focus on what they can control themselves. And once a Sigma becomes deeply invested in personal growth, it becomes much harder for distractions from the past to pull them away from their path. Asterisk 7. They become indifferent to criticism. One of the most surprising signs that a Sigma has stopped caring is their reaction to criticism. In the past, they may have taken the time to defend themselves, explain their intentions, or correct false assumptions, not because they needed approval, but because they cared enough to be understood. When that care disappears, so does the reaction. Criticism that once might have received a response is now met with silence. Negative comments no longer trigger long explanations. Judgments that once felt important suddenly lose their power. This change often confuses people. Some expect the Sigma to argue. Others expect them to defend themselves. Instead, they get almost no reaction at all. The reason is simple. A Sigma understands that not every opinion deserves attention. Once they stop caring about someone's approval, that person's criticism also loses value. This doesn't mean they ignore useful feedback. If criticism can help them improve, they'll listen. The difference is that they no longer waste energy trying to convince people who have already decided what they want to believe. Indifference is powerful because it shows emotional freedom. The Sigma is no longer allowing someone else's opinion to control their mood, decisions, or self-worth. Many people think anger is the strongest response. In reality, indifference is often stronger. Anger still shows emotional investment. Indifference shows that the investment is gone. And when a Sigma reaches the point where criticism no longer affects them, it's usually a sign that they've emotionally detached from the source of that criticism. Asterisk 8. They stop chasing people. A Sigma can be incredibly loyal when they care about someone. They may invest time, effort, patience, and understanding into a relationship. But there is one thing they rarely do forever: chase people who clearly don't want to stay. When a Sigma stops caring, they stop chasing. If someone pulls away, they let them. If someone becomes distant, they notice but don't beg for attention. If someone repeatedly shows a lack of interest, they stop trying to force a connection. This is not because they don't value relationships, it's because they value self respect. Many people spend years chasing individuals who constantly send mixed signals. They keep reaching out, keep explaining, and keep hoping things will change. A Sigma eventually realizes that genuine relationships should not require endless pursuit. Effort should be mutual. Once they understand that their effort is no longer being matched, they begin stepping back, not out of anger, but out of acceptance. This can be shocking for those who assumed the Sigma would always be there. They become so used to the Sigma's patience and consistency that they fail to notice how much effort was being given. Then one day, the effort stops, the messages stop, the chasing stops, the attempts to reconnect disappear, and what remains is silence. For a Sigma, stopping the chase is often one of the clearest signs that emotional attachment has faded. They have accepted reality and chosen to move forward rather than continue pursuing someone who isn't meeting them halfway. Asterisk 9. They give back the same energy. They receive. One of the most noticeable changes in a Sigma who has stopped caring is that they stop over-investing. When they care deeply, they often give more than they receive. They make extra effort. They show patience. They offer support, even when it's inconvenient. But after enough disappointment, something changes. Instead of giving unlimited energy, they begin matching energy. If someone shows respect, they receive respect. If someone invests effort, they receive effort. If someone becomes distant, the Sigma becomes distant too. This isn't revenge, it's balance. The Sigma simply stops carrying the entire relationship alone. Many people don't notice how much a Sigma contributes until those contributions disappear. They become accustomed to the attention, understanding, and reliability. When those things are reduced, the difference becomes impossible to ignore. Matching energy protects the Sigma from constantly giving more than they receive. It creates healthier boundaries and prevents emotional exhaustion. What's interesting is that some people interpret this change as coldness. In reality, it's often the opposite. It's the Sigma finally recognizing that relationships should involve mutual effort. The moment they stop caring enough to overextend themselves is the moment they begin treating the relationship exactly as it is, rather than as they wish it could be. And for many people, that reality can be difficult to accept. Asterisk 10. They find peace without you. This is the final sign, and perhaps the strongest one of all. A Sigma has truly stopped caring when they discover they are completely at peace without the person, situation, or relationship that once occupied so much of their attention. At one point, they may have spent hours thinking about it. They may have invested enormous emotional energy trying to make things work. They may have hoped, waited, and given countless chances. But eventually, something changes. The attachment fatigue, the overthinking stops, the emotional dependence disappears, and in its place comes peace. This doesn't mean the Sigma hates anyone. It doesn't mean they're angry or bitter. In fact, it's often the opposite. They've simply accepted reality and moved on. The situation no longer controls their emotions. The person no longer occupies their thoughts. The absence no longer feels painful. For many people, this stage is difficult to understand because they expect emotional detachment to look dramatic. They expect resentment, arguments, or conflict. A Sigma often chooses something much quieter: acceptance. They stop trying to change the past. They stop wishing things were different. They stop waiting for something that may never happen. Instead, they focus on the present and build a life they enjoy. And that is why this final sign is so powerful. Because once a Sigma finds genuine peace without you, there is usually no anger left, no resentment left, and no unfinished business left. Only acceptance. And by that point, they have already moved on. When a Sigma stops caring, it rarely happens overnight. It's usually the result of repeated disappointment, broken trust, or realizing that their energy is no longer being valued. The signs are often quiet, but they are powerful. Less explanation, less effort, less emotional investment, and more focus on personal peace. Asterisk now, I want to hear from you. Which of these 10 signs do you think is the clearest indication that a Sigma has truly stopped caring? Leave your answer in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to asterisk subscribe, turn on notifications, and join the community for more Sigma mindset and self-improvement content. Asterisk, remember, a Sigma doesn't always leave loudly. Sometimes they leave emotionally long before anyone notices.